I rise briefly to speak to Bill C-5 to make 2 points. I do want to say that we talked about the criticisms a lot, but the bill is an important bill, as my colleague just pointed out. Certainly, we are talking about lowering interprovincial barriers and building big things fast. In terms of the bill, the first part of it, enact the free trade and labor mobility in Canada, I'm certainly quite happy with that and in support of it, and by and large in support of the Building Canada Act Part 2. My problem is with sections 21, 22, and 23. So the first point I just want to make is a few comments on the issue of the Henry VIII clauses. These have been referred to often. I know when I raised it with a minister, she chided me for using colorful language, and I've been chided elsewhere for that. But I want to talk about the origin of that term. So in 1539, the British Parliament passed an act called the Proclamation by the Crown Act, some 500 years ago. And the purpose of that act was to allow the king to rule by proclamation or decree and completely usurp Parliament. That was what Parliament allowed him to do. The British Parliament then repealed the act 8 years later in 1847. In Canada, the effect of a Henry VIII approach, and as noted in C-5, the consequences of such clauses is the delegation by Parliament of its functions, of our functions, to the Governor and Council, and in some cases to a single minister. The problem was certainly bigger with the original bill, C-5, but the House, in my opinion, has improved the bill considerably. The opposition has placed some important guardrails and limitations, and I'd say the opposition did a major favor to the government in terms of improving the bill. So some of the improvements, as have been outlined by members such as Senator Dalphon and others, the Parliamentary Review Committee, the Conflict of Interest Guidelines, National Security Review, Indigenous Consultation, and the annual review by the Minister to be placed before Parliament. I find myself in agreement with a number of the points that have been made. While I would have preferred to see sections 21, 22, and 23 being dropped, they have been contained. And if I can use a somewhat oxymoronic term, we have a situation of Henry VIII contained now. The second point I want to share, and I beg your indulgence, colleagues. We've all received a lot of mail, and it's good for us to have the opportunity to speak to the people who've been writing to us. And certainly, I have been getting a lot of mail because I had raised this issue of the Henry VIII clauses on a few occasions. And so there's, as with all of us, people are counting on us to vote one way or the other on this act. So let me share my reasoning with you. And I would say that I was inspired by the Salisbury Convention. So if I could come up with the term modified Salisbury. So what is the Salisbury Convention? It basically says that if a government implements policies that it ran on that was part of their platform when they were elected, that it is generally expected that the upper house, the unelected house, will support those policies whether or not we agree with them. So somewhat modified as follows. So I have 5 steps to my reasoning. The first, the government, the Liberal Party generally promised in the platform to have the Build Canada project. They didn't talk about the specific clauses, the Henry VIII clauses, but they talked about doing big things and moving things fast. The second point I'd make, step 2, is that the government introduced a bill. Step 3, they heard criticisms. One can question whether there was enough time for that. Step 4, they led by the opposition. The House of Commons made several changes to the bill. And step 5, the House of Commons passed a bill originated by the Liberal Party based on its platform and amended by the opposition parties. And so we have a bill that is considerably changed from the way it was organized. For me, on balance, these are significant changes that have been made. The guardrails have been put in place. He's a useful and important, and for that reason, I'm willing to support Bill C-5. Thank you.